This Cowboys team is 3-1. They've missed their starting quarterback since the first game of the season, right? Like, these are circumstances that I don't think anybody could have predicted for this team, especially considering that they are in a winning position and they look so very good. And when these things happen, people typically heap praise on the head coach. And correct me if I'm wrong here, CA. It doesn't feel like Mike McCarthy getting the love behind this. Am I wrong here?
You know, it's so wild. You're not hearing the love. I don't think people are not giving him credit for it. I'm talking about being 3-1. You're just not hearing people do it. It's almost like, yeah, okay. The man was on the hot seat before the season started.
Yeah.
And I'm here to say that this point of the season, he ain't on the hot seat at all. At all. In fact, you have to give him his credit for rallying the troops and the way they have won these games. We don't know how much he's helped Kellen Moore, but after that first game, he said, I'm going to be more hands-on and help out Kellen Moore a little bit.
So this is the thing, and that's what I want to dig into here in this segment. Why is it that it doesn't feel like Mike McCarthy has been given a lot of credit here? Because like I said, when we end up in these situations, we talk about Mike Tomlin's winning record, how he's always has a winning record, never had been below 500. Mm-hmm. We talk about, even in these situations, especially folks like Sean McVay get a ton of hype in those situations. We talk about what we've seen in Miami this season with Mike McDaniel, where there's just been a lot of love outside of obviously the big thing with the concussion situation with Tua Tagovailoa. But the head coaches get a lot of love in these situations where things are going right, and it doesn't feel like Mike McCarthy has quite gotten that. So why do you think that situation is?
Okay, is it just me and you talking here and the Tolos listening?
Yeah, ain't nobody listening?
Nobody's going to tell Mike McCarthy what I'm getting ready to say, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Because what really is going on is, remember, he came into the season on the hot seat. It's like, okay, we already know Sean in the TV booth going to take his job next year, right? We already knew that. Sean Payton, he's going to take his job. So he's on the hot seat until the thing collapsed because they retooled the team, and it's like, okay, Mike McCarthy, there ain't no way you can fix this front office and set you up, and here's Jerry wanting Sean Payton. But what has happened is, they have survived all the adversity and are 3-1. And it's not because Cooper Rush is undefeated.
What? No, that's not what I've heard. That's not what I've heard.
That's what the fans are saying.
The
ones that, that love the backup quarterback. The reason they're 3-1 is because the defense is undefeated. All right? Even in the loss to Tampa Bay to start the season, defense still shined. The defense has only given up one touchdown a game. And who's the coach of the defense? The defensive coordinator? His name is DQ, Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn is getting a lot of credit that Mike McCarthy probably would have if he were the defensive-minded coach, because that's what's shining on this team. You follow what I'm saying? If up in Kansas City, Andy Reid's getting all the shine because Patrick Mahomes and the offense are making it happen, and Andy Reid is an offensive coach. You mentioned Sean McVay with the Rams. He's an offensive-minded coach. If they were, their offense is Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford, all those guys making plays offensively, even though you got Aaron Donald on defense, but it's the offense that's getting the shine. There's no really offensively, you can look at the stats, Cooper Rush is just holding it down. The defense is carrying this team, and Mike McCarthy is not known as a defensive guy. So therefore, he's not getting the love.
But what's funny about that, because I think you're right in some respects, right? Like when we talk about the coordinators or the head coaches that are play callers, right? Those guys, we do a good job of routing that credit back to them. But like being a play caller and being a head coach aren't the same thing, right? Like sometimes nowadays it feels like head coaches are hired off of being great coordinators, and those aren't like the same job. And I understand that they're technically not the same job, but they're not similar. Calling an offense or building an offense isn't the same as being somebody's boss.
Exactly.
Like in the way that a head coach is.
Ask the guy that's coaching the Denver Broncos right now.
Yeah, Nathaniel Hackett. Oh boy,
he's a hell of a play caller when Aaron Rodgers is your quarterback.
But he wasn't even a play caller. No. This is his first time being a play caller as a head coach now. He wasn't a play caller with Green Bay. Funny enough, during that Blake Bortles time in Jacksonville, because a friend of mine reminded me this, Nathaniel Hackett was the OC at that point, and he wasn't a play caller then, but he was the offensive coordinator. He was a quarterback coach and then became the offensive coordinator then. But coming back to it's just head coaches, like their job is almost hard for us to see. And we typically judge them based off records. That's why I brought up the Mike Tomlin thing, because Mike Tomlin, I don't know if at this point in his career, anybody goes, oh man, he's a defensive-minded coach and he's the one running these things. Everybody just kind of views him as like the boss dude, right? Like there's just an overwhelming amount of evidence that he does his job well. What is it about the job that he does well? I don't think that we actually have a good idea. And the point I'm getting at here is, I feel like we don't actually know what makes a good head coach.
I'm going to tell you something. Just because you can call plays or you're a great coordinator does not make you a head coach. I'm going to give you the Wade Phillips example. Wade Phillips, one of the best defensive coordinators in NFL history. He is. His resume, everybody knows about the Phillips 3-4. All I can tell you is you put him in as the head coach, it doesn't work out very well. It didn't work out with the Cowboys. I mean, everybody liked Wade, but some people call him Coach Cupcake. I'm looking at Dan Quinn. When they hired Dan Quinn, I was excited. A lot of people were like, oh, look at what he did in Atlanta. He didn't know what he was doing. I'm like, the dude co-created the Legion of Boom. He's a great defensive coordinator. But look what he did in Atlanta. And now everybody's like, oh man, Dan Quinn is the man. You don't know if Dan Quinn from Atlanta is going to be the best head coach for the Cowboys, or Dan Quinn, the defensive coordinator from Seattle, is going to be a great head coach for the Dallas Cowboys. Right now, Mike McCarthy's getting no love because the defense is doing the job and carrying this 3-1 record. At the same time, let me also say this, and I was saying this on a crosstalk with G-Bag a couple of weeks ago. Actually, it was last week. I said Dak Prescott's thumb injury has laid the bar on the ground and saved Mike McCarthy's job. Because, and here's the logical reason behind it. Going into the season, nobody was going to say that this team had a successful season if they won the division and made the playoffs. No, you were saying they got to get out of the first round. Some people were saying they got to get to the NFC Championship game. Mike McCarthy's going to be fired if he doesn't win a couple of playoff games, because nobody's winning playoff games around here. It's not about winning the division. Anybody can win the division. Win a damn playoff game. Well, guess what? People have become giddy because the Cowboys are off to a 3-1 start without Dak Prescott. So the bar is on the ground. Everybody's like, we might make the playoffs. We might win the NFC East. And guess who benefits? Not Dan Quinn, Mike McCarthy. He keeps his job because they make the playoffs. So the bar is on the freaking ground. And is it fair for everybody else? All I know is for Mike McCarthy, it's a good thing for him. And let me give him his credit. We mentioned the fact that the way they're winning these games, the defense is leading it, but overall, as a head coach, he's keeping everybody in their roles properly. And like I said, we don't know exactly what he's telling Kellen Moore, what not to do. We're giving Kellen Moore his credit, but he did say after the first game, I'm going to help the guy out. Here's the most important stat to keep an eye on that you have to give Mike McCarthy his credit on. Last year, they're the most penalized team in the NFL. And he said, we're going to clean it up. Guess what? Right now, as we speak, they're the least penalized team in the NFL. Mike McCarthy did what he said he was going to do. And maybe that's also a reason why this team is 3-1. And you got to give it to Mike McCarthy because he said that's what he was going to do. And so far, he's done that.
So, yeah, I just found that interesting because, again,
and he's done a great job. Somebody just texted me. I texted it. 214 says, you don't think Mike McCarthy's done a good job? Yes, he has. But I'm saying the judgment for him going into the season was, unless they win a couple of playoff games, his ass is fired and Sean Payton comes in or Dan Quinn gets elevated. And right now, like I said, he's not getting his credit because the defense is doing so well. You're crediting Dan Quinn. At the same time, you got to give Mike McCarthy his props because he's riding her. He's CEO in the whole damn thing. And he's also advising Kellen Moore because he said he would. And you don't know the details on it because they don't share all of that. And he's cleaned up the penalties, which is one of the things that was the Achilles heel of last year's team.
Okay. From the 214, they said it's size discrimination. All right. No, I do find this interesting. From the 817, our fan base has become so numb to good regular seasons because we always get bounced in the playoffs. We'll start praising the coach, players, and front office when they do it in December and January.
Well,
and I understand that, like, that level of fatigue to some extent, except like that hasn't necessarily shown itself to be the case when it comes to the way that people are reacting to Cooper Rush, when the ways that people are reacting to the defense and Micah Parsons and Dan Quinn, and I'm not saying that those things are wrong because very clearly Cooper Rush has handled himself well in the position that he's been put in. The defense has been incredible, particularly that defensive front. And Dan Quinn has been a big reason in helping facilitate that. I just find it interesting that we end up in a situation where the dude who is in charge, who takes responsibility and usually takes credit in when things happen, it doesn't feel like that's been the way that this has gone. And I wonder how much of that is just like people have decided the way that they feel about him, and that's going to be what happens, and they will kind of shade the whatever happens, the evidence afterwards to that original standpoint, myself included.
Well, I'm going to say this again. The season's early. They're 3-1 right now. Enjoy all of this. Mike McCarthy deserves a whole lot of credit, but at the same time, he's not getting it because Cooper Rush is the darling and the defense is who's getting the job done, and he is not known as a defensive mind. If he had this reputation of I'm a defensive guru, then you give him all the credit. But he was up there in Green Bay as the offensive coordinator for Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, calling the plays, and won the damn Super Bowl at AT&T Stadium, calling his plays. So that's where you think the difference is. That's where you would give him credit for the difference, knowing his history. Well, this year, Kellen Moore's calling the plays. He's whispering in his ear. Dan Quinn has got the stellar defense that's doing all those things. So there are people like they're not going to budge. And at the same time, remember, in a total text, he said, hey, 972 says Mike McCarthy's getting no love because he's a dead man walking. It's not a hot seat. Everyone wants Sean Payton. Why give love to the person you know you're going to get rid of at the season's end, that you're sending home? So that's part of it. Like I said, the bar is on the ground right now. But guess what? That he's going to get all heated up again in November if the Cowboys aren't headed for the playoffs. And if they make the playoffs and get one and done, Sean Payton's going to get a phone call.